bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the most read group of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more, all featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL, from the great one to the next one, from the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime. Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm going to be your host this evening. We've got a bunch of writers with us from the Edmonton Oilers on the hockeyreaders.com. They cover the Oilers. They cover other things too, but focus a lot on the Oilers. We've got Colton Pankiw with us. Hey, Colton, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good. We've also got Brian Swane with us. Brian, how you doing?
Great to be here.
Good. And Teagan Giselbrecht. How are you, Teagan?
You pronounced that perfectly. I'm doing electric right now. Despite
Awesome.
The Oilers' last two games, I've been doing good.
Good. Well, we're going to cover a few different topics tonight, but I appreciate all three of you joining us here for the very first episode. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully we're smooth sailing all the way through. And we've got an interesting interview with Jack Michaels coming up after we're done here. I had a chance to talk to him today, and some of what he said is pretty interesting. So we might cover some of that. We might not, but we'll get into some Oilers topics. But we might as well start. I'll throw it to you first, Colton. Last two games, we were on an 11-2 run. The Edmonton Oilers were really hot, and they still look good, but they have not looked great in the last two games against Toronto. An opportunity for the Oilers to jump into first place had they swept all three games. They've got one more here, but they lost two games and didn't just lose. They didn't score. Are you concerned? Do you have any issues with the game, or is it just kind of Toronto's played really well?
I don't think it's anything to panic too much about. Like you said, they're just on a really good run here. So I think eventually something was bound to happen. Obviously, getting shut out both games isn't ideal. And the fact that the Leafs didn't have Matthews, you would have liked to have got some points there. But I don't think it's anything to worry about ultimately. Hopefully they can get a win tomorrow.
Brian, you got the same opinion? Are you thinking that this is anything concerning or not too much to worry about yet?
It's maybe a bit of a wake-up call as just to where they are in the overall picture of the league. Maybe they're not quite on the level of championship contending yet, is where the Leafs think that they are. They still played very well this season, and I don't think this time they've hit the panic button at all. I think one thing that we've seen throughout the league, especially in the North Division so far, is that teams get hot and get cold real quick. And I think if you look at just about every team so far, there's probably been an instance where all of them have been in a bit of a funk, and all of them have been on hot streaks as well. And the Leafs have just played really well these last couple games. They've been full value. They've, every facet of the game. They've been the better team. They've gone with 2 wins, and, we'll see what the others can do tomorrow night. A lot of season to go yet. Yeah,
well, they certainly are two different teams in that Toronto's been consistent for pretty much most of the season. They've been doing really well. Injuries, non-injuries, roster juggling, and the Oilers were a little different, right? They didn't start very well. They had one goalie, but they came on really strong and really took off. But these last two games, Dave Tippett has sort of thrown things into the blender a little bit with what we're hearing at practice today. Teagan, what's your thought? Is it the right move to juggle the lines up a little bit? We're hearing that Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, and Kyler Yamamoto might be playing together for this last of 3 games. What are you thinking about that?
That's right. I have my stats computer over here just so you guys know what I'm looking off over here. But yeah, I definitely believe that it's in the right interest for the team to bring back together the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto line back together. As Brian wrote today, that line was electric over the past however long, I believe last 2 seasons, going on the 16-6-4 run, which began on New Year's Eve back in 2019. Altogether, through their time together, they've won 93 games, lost 29 of them, and overtime losses are 56 as it has here. But I definitely believe it's the right move, considering the fact that, as you guys pitched in here, that these last 2 games are not what the Oilers expected. As you mentioned, the Matthews less Maple Leafs shouldn't have maybe beaten the Oilers, especially when they came into these games. So it's an 11-2 streak at that point, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely believe it's definitely time to switch things up around, bring that money line back together. Hopefully Oilers can turn things around.
Okay, so Brian, I didn't catch the fact that you'd written an article about this. Is that right? So you talk specifically about this line reuniting. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think they should. It's interesting. It's not just as I was going through this, and it's Oilers fans have been wanting to see this basically since they split up at the end of last season, right? I mean, this has been they were the hottest line in hockey, and they broke up, and we know why Tippett did it. Obviously tried to get more balanced scoring throughout the lineup. But if you look at what the team needs a spark, obviously offensively right now. So there's that to start with. No goals in these 2 games. But beyond that, if you look at how as individuals, Giselbrecht, Nugent-Hopkins, and Yamamoto have played recently, they're all in a bit of offensive slumps as individuals too. So it's not just a thing of getting the teams going. It's a thing of getting these individuals going. Giselbrecht has scored once has one game when he scored in the last 10 games. He has 2 goals in that game, but otherwise he's been held off the board 9 times. Nugent-Hopkins, I think, is only at 3 times in the last 13 games that he scored, and Yamamoto scored once in all of February. So these are all guys that, they seem to be better together than they are apart. And we didn't notice it maybe when the Oilers were reeling off 11 to 13 wins, but here they are. Shutout back-to-back games for the first time in a couple of years. You're looking for a spark. That seems to be the easy answer. So we'll see.
Colton, are you excited about the idea of this? Because there was a lot of people last year's playing rounds that was wondering what Tippett was doing. Like, why would you split these guys up? They were the best line in hockey for the second, or at least 25 games when Yamamoto was up last season, right? And then he immediately doesn't even try them. He splits them at the very beginning of the playing round. So are you thinking that this is the way to go? Is this something that you're excited by, or you're like, it might hurt the first line, so I'm not really sure?
Yeah, there was a lot of people you've seen all season that were pretty upset about it with Tippett, myself included. Just kind of wondering what had taken so long and why this is just happening. I did see a good point today, though, that now that Puljujarvi is starting to play really a lot better, even compared to the start of the season, I think Tippett's had a lot more confidence now to put that line together with McDavid, just knowing that he has someone on that right side that can really keep up with them and just play his game. So I think that's helped with putting back together that Draisaitl line. Because yeah, like I said, I've been wanting that back since the start of the season.
Yeah, and I'm getting the feeling. I mean, I'm excited to see it. Now we don't know for sure that Tippett's going to do it. We heard that they were doing this skating these guys together at practice, and we find out that Alex Chason's been suspended for 1 game. His cross check on Jimmy Vesey at the end of the last game. So they've fluctuated a little bit. James Neal's going to be in. He's going on the top line. So I'm curious to see if Neal can get sparked at the same time, because he hasn't played much and he hasn't done much this season. But you're right. I think Jesse Puljujarvi has played well enough that if you can get a pairing there and keep Connor McDavid going with Puljujarvi, you're in pretty good shape. So it's just finding that third person. If Neal can get in there and crash a net or do something, banging a couple of rebounds, or just to get the scoring going, right? Because that's the whole deal. With you've got 2 games, one of the highest scoring teams in the league hasn't scored in 2 straight games. Teagan, are you thinking that Connor McDavid's going to explode here? Because this is what we've seen so far. When he's held off the scoreboard, he comes back and he has a hat trick twice. So it didn't happen last game, but he's due, isn't he?
Yeah, I have Sportsnet stats, advanced stats pull up here, and yeah, it shows that Connor McDavid has amazing bounce backs games. When the Oilers go after recording after recording 0 points rather in the game, he has amazing bounce back games. Through 92 games, when he records 0 points, the next following game he nets 50 goals. He netted 131 points as well as those. 16.4% of his shots go in, so he's good percentage of the time he finds a way to put one past the netminder. But that was all before those 92 games are not included in the last 2. So we're hoping as Oilers fans in the area as well are hoping for that he finds a way to definitely have a 5-point game like he did on that last, was it 2 Saturdays ago when they matched up against the Calgary Flames? He had a 5-point night. So here in Edmonton. So yeah, definitely people are hoping he finds his way back on track.
He was absolutely dominant in that game in Calgary. I mean, he took over from the very beginning. He just like he decided he was going to win that whole game. And it's not like it's just Connor McDavid, because Draisaitl, he's getting fancy passes all over the place. But so I think it was Colton. You brought up a very interesting point with Puljujarvi, and maybe we should go there, because I did say that we should probably talk about this guy. Here's a guy who came in this year, and I don't know if anybody thought he was going to rebound like he has. not the last 2 games withstanding, obviously. But Colton, what's your thoughts so far on Puljujarvi's season? Here's a guy that started in the middle. He's on a third line, works his way up pretty quickly, and has never looked back since. What's your thoughts on this guy's season so far?
Yeah, like you were saying, I think heading into the season, there was quite a few question marks. I was really unsure. The first time he was just with Edmonton, he looked so kind of awkward on the ice, just obviously no confidence. But he's an easy guy to cheer for. So I was really hoping that he would find his game. And right away, he looks a lot more confident. He seems more sturdy on his feet. He's just a lot less awkward. And yeah, I think he played well at the beginning. Obviously, he wasn't getting any puck luck, but got put up on McDavid's line, and I think he's been really good. Honestly, better than I was expecting. Kudos to Ken Holland too, because it looked like he was gone last year for sure, and probably wouldn't have gotten much for him in a trade. So I'm glad they've stuck it out. It looks like a good move right now.
Well, Brian, there were question marks coming into this season about the NHL expansion draft and what you would do with a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi and whether or not you would make sure to protect him, or maybe he doesn't come in and have a fantastic season and you can let him go and not protect the forward. But has he cemented himself enough at this point in the season that the Oilers would be crazy not to try to protect him?
Yeah, I think so. And that's honestly not something I thought about a lot yet, the expansion draft situation, but it's a great point you raised because he's forcing their hand. They are going to maybe have some very difficult decisions to make in respect to who they protect and who they make available. Now, I think you have to hang on to him now. He's still really young. Great point by Colton. He's just a great, a guy you can't help but cheering for, right? I mean, he just, the exuberance he has as being part of the game, he just, you see him smiling there on the bench and he just has a great time. And I think it's infectious, and you want guys like that around your team. And I'm just so really impressed with his demeanor since he's come back. This is an entirely new person. Because he started the season, what did he go, about 5 or 6 games before he even got his first goal? And even now, he's only got 6 goals in the season. So he's contributing, he's playing well, but he's not lighting up the scoreboard. But he hasn't, if this was 3 years ago, people would have been saying, well, why is, he's gone 5 games without a goal? What's wrong with him? And he's found other ways to contribute. If he's not scored, he hasn't let that bother him. He's just continued to keep playing, making a difference. And he's earned that spot on the top line alongside McDavid. And to get back to the point you guys made a couple minutes ago, is it put them in a situation where they do have that flexibility now. If they want to send Nuge back down to the quote unquote second line, they can do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have the numbers exactly right, but I remember hearing some point at this season that Puljujarvi had like 27 high-grade scoring chances without a goal. I think that was what it was, or something like that at the beginning. But you could tell that the season was different, right? It was one of those things where he wasn't getting discouraged. And I wonder if that's as much about the environment around him as it is him too. Like now his English is a whole lot better. He seems happier because his girlfriend's with him. We've seen pictures of the dog, all this stuff that's online right now. Like he just seems like a happy kid, right? But
it's a great point.
I think the coaches have really supported that too, right? Like in that old environment, it wasn't there. And Tippett's patient. Holland knows what he's got because he's been through this kind of thing before in Detroit with other players. Can you speak to that a little bit? Do you think that's the case?
I think you made the perfect point there. Whatever it was, number of scoring chances that he had. If you go back 3 years ago, it's going to be, why isn't he converting? This kid, he gets the opportunities and he just can't deliver. Now we're looking at it in an entirely different perspective. He's getting the opportunities. We know it's going to come. So, I mean, that just shows you how the culture, his attitude has shifted. The culture around him, which is probably a large part, is as you've alluded to, is why his attitude has shifted. But the culture of the team and the position he's been placed in, he's put in a position to succeed where maybe he wasn't before. Yeah, I think the organizational culture has a lot to do with that, but I also think he deserves a lot of credit too. And as you say, he's got his girlfriend with him. He's much more comfortable with the language. He's just obviously in a spot where he feels a lot more at ease himself. When he was brought in before, as an 18, 19-year-old in a foreign country, things aren't going well. You're still learning the language, or you're learning to adjust to your new surroundings. That would be a difficult situation for any of us to be in.
Yeah. And Teagan, what do you think about the fact that Connor McDavid's probably loving this too? Like, there's a guy who's been with the Oilers who produces no matter really who he's playing with, but it's got to feel good that you probably have a guy that is not probably going to leave your line. Now, we know the Nugent-Hopkins was meant to be in that spot for the beginning of the season, but when things get a little hazy and off tilt, you can move Nugent-Hopkins here. But McDavid probably has to love that he's got Puljujarvi kind of as his wingman, doesn't he?
Yes, absolutely. From the first overall pick to a fourth overall pick, both high draft picks in the NHL draft. Yeah, Connor definitely has extended his kind hand to him, said, hey, you know what? Your first stance here wasn't quite what you wanted, wasn't quite what we wanted. There was lots of quotes coming. A lot of the guys came out in support of Puljujarvi this time around in North America from the beginning of the season, actually before the beginning of the season, back when they were doing their preseason games or like practices rather, when they had the 10-day span, their practice games at Naderita, my old stopping ground. Many quotes came out saying that, yeah, they love Pool Party this time around. Definitely, Brian, you hit it right on the nail on the hammer there. The hammer on the nail rather, that he's got an infectious smile. Either way around, yeah, he's just definitely loving it. And as you pointed out, Jim, Puljujarvi has tons of chances of scoring. Through 23 games of the season so far, he does have 6 goals and 3 assists, and he has multitude of chances on the power play as well. So, definitely someone that McDavid feels comfortable with kicking it out there, and we'll see this young prospect. I use young kind of and prospect kind of on the loosely, but we definitely see him in the upside moving forward.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. For anybody who's just watching us now, this is Oilers Overtime, the very first episode on THW's YouTube channel, Facebook, a bunch of different platforms where you can watch us. So we're grateful that you join us. We've got Colton, Ryan, and Teagan with us, and my name is Jim Parsons. But we brought up Nugent-Hopkins a little bit, so maybe Colton, let's go there. We have another interview with Jack Michaels coming up in the second half of this video, so we encourage people to stay tuned to watch that because he's got a lot of information there. But he did touch on the Nugent-Hopkins potential extension, the contract situation. What's your take on what's going on with Nugent-Hopkins? Everything we're hearing about the fact that maybe it's sticky. He wants to come back. The Oilers would like to have him back, but the numbers might not match up. Do you have any concern that Nugent-Hopkins' deal is not going to get done here in Edmonton? Colton, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It's a tough situation. He's been my favorite Oiler, if I'm being honest, for the last number of seasons now. It just seems like I do think he wants to stay. I think he's never complained through all the tough years they had. It just depends on the number for me. It's tough because in some senses, you think they could maybe fill the spot, whether it's, obviously the goalie situation's a different thing right now with Koskinen's contract and whatnot, but there are other holes on this team too. So it really depends on the number for me. I'd like to see them try and get it to work, but the longer it's going on, I'm not going to be able to work something out. I hope I'm wrong because, like I said, I really like him. I want him to be back, but I don't know. I don't feel overly confident in it right now.
Brian, what about you? I know that there's some talk that maybe this could go beyond 7 in an open market situation, but the Oilers would like to keep it under 7. Where do you sit with this, and what number looks good for him?
It's a difficult situation. As Colton pointed out, the Oilers, I think, are going to head into the free agent market this season or this off season with the number one priority being getting a goaltender. And they're probably going to have to, where the first option is going to be for the majority of the money that they have available. And, they've got Nurse, I believe, is coming up on his free agent contract in a couple seasons now, or at the end of the next season. He's going to command a lot. So I don't know if they can check all these boxes. Something might have to give, and that might be Nugent-Hopkins having to walk. I'm fine. If they can somehow manage to get it to a workable figure, and it's 7 years, I'm okay with that. If it's 5 years, that's fine. I know that, as you pointed out, though, he's probably going to be able to attract a 7-year offer in the open market. And this is the contract. He's heading into that contract that all the players play for, right? You get to that sweet spot when you're kind of in your late 20s. You've proven yourself, but you still got a lot of miles ahead on you. This is the contract of your career. This is the one when you're going to get the longest term. You're probably going to get the largest amount. And you got to think there's an awful lot of suitors out there for him. And I know he wants to stay. I think obviously his dedication over the years is, it's without question. But his opportunities will be there. He'll be tempted to leave. And the fact that something hasn't happened yet, maybe starts to make you wonder now.
Well, Teagan, I'll ask you this question. Do you think that what's not happening with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has anything to do, and we've talked about a little bit with the expansion draft and the COVID financial marketplace that is the NHL right now. Do you think any of this has anything to do with that? Like, we're not hearing much about the Nugent-Hopkins extensions because maybe they're going to sign him after the expansion draft is over? Or do you think the Oilers don't want to risk that? It's not a situation they want to get themselves into where they say, hey, let's let this guy remain a free agent through the expansion draft, and then we'll revisit those talks later? Or do they want to get this done the second the two sides can come together on something?
Those are interesting points. Colton and Brian, you guys really brought up interesting points as well. But I just want to address the elephant in the room. It feels like ever since Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, RNH, was drafted back in 2011, first overall, it feels like 3 to 4 seasons after, Oilers fans in the area were like heavy betting, well, not betting, but heavy opinionated when it comes to get RNH out of town. I don't know why people have been on this train kind of to kick RNH out of town, but it just feels like it's on my mind whenever someone mentions him or he's ever in a headline. People always say, my family included, always say they should have traded him years ago. And so I just feel like he's played for the Red Deer Rebels of the WHL. He's been an Oiler his entire career. I feel like he wants to stay. When many people talk about replacing star players, but more specifically replacing head coaches, they say, fire the coach. But what they do not focus on is who they're going to replace with. We can say, sure, trade away Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or watch him walk away, but who are we replacing him with? Julian, another writer for us, he's not a part of this podcast just quite yet, but he wrote an interesting piece regarding how many wingers, left and right wingers, are open on the free market this upcoming off season, and there is a boatload, to put it lightly. So I think RNH will find in himself that he wants to play here. He wants to play with McDavid, Draisaitl. He wants to play with his buddies. He's been here since 2011. There's no, in my opinion, he's going to stay. To the chagrin of some Oilers fans, he's going to stay.
So you have to fill me in. What's the chagrin? Is it money? Is that the situation that most people are saying that's why they don't want him, or they just don't like him as a player, or what's
they just don't like him? I don't know if it's looks. He might not be the most handsome guy in the lineup, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But no, people just had this outright hatred for RNH, and I don't feel like it's deserved. Oilers Nation, another site that covers Oilers in the area, has mentioned many times they want to keep RNH. The Oilers, I believe that Dave Tippett has said that if he could keep him in the lineup and give him minutes, he definitely will. So Ken Holland has also made it clear that he wants to sign him as well. So I don't understand where the hatred comes from personally, but I definitely get it quite often. So I kind of cringe, I guess, in a sense, when I see people saying they should have traded him years ago. Because no, who are you going to replace him with? Once again, you go back to the head coach scenario, fire him. Okay, who are you going to replace him with? Get rid of this winger who performs every year. Who are you going to replace him with?
Well, for all those people who are saying terrible, terrible things about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I'm going to come to bat for the guy. And I'm going to say, you're absolutely right. There's not another guy that you can find on the market that's going to give you all of the assets that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is going to give you. Now, having said that, I totally understand where Ken Holland is coming from, in that there's only so much money to go around, and you've got a lot of bridge contracts coming up. You've got goaltending issues you've got to take care of. You've got other things that are going to require some money. So I do understand why he's not just going, okay, here's $7.5 million. Like, I get that, but can you find another center who can play wing anywhere in your top six? Can you find a penalty killer? Can you find a power play first unit guy? Can you find all of that on the market for $6 to $7 million? I don't know that you can. Right. So anybody who's saying that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is not a useful player, get your head out of what, because that's not the deal at all. Am I wrong, Colton? Is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins being undervalued, or is he exactly where he should be?
No, yeah, not at all. I think, like you said, really a jack of all trades. Again, it just comes down to that number. Like, do you go over $7 million? Like, it's it's tough, right? Because they have other holes still that they do need to fill in the lineup, and guys that they have to re-sign, like Brian pointed out, Darnell Nurse after next season. That's going to be a big one. So it's really just a number. I mean, I hope that he'll take a bit of a discount, I guess you could call it, to stay, whether that's 6.5, 7. But at the same time, it is his opportunity to cash in on what will probably be his biggest contract. So it's tough to say.
Well, let's touch on one more subject before we close things off here. Connor McDavid, we know how good he is. We know that the last 2 games are an anomaly, that this is not what we should expect from Connor McDavid. Brian, I'll start with you. We asked earlier before we got on the air here, does Connor McDavid get 100 points this season? Is he capable of doing it in 56 games? Now, the last 2 games notwithstanding have slowed that down a little bit, but he sure looked like he was trending in that direction. Can he do it? Is it possible that Connor McDavid can get 100 points in 56 games?
Yeah, I wrote the article a couple weeks ago that kind of broke it down and did all the projections when both he and Draisaitl were on pace for 100 points. And since then, Draisaitl has fallen well off the pace for 100 points. But McDavid's floating right around there still. It would be absolutely remarkable. I think it was when I calculated it, it was about he would have to average a point per game rate at, I think it's about 1.85 or so. And it's something that only has happened 16 or 17 other times in league history. And the overwhelming majority of the guys that are either numbered 99 or 66. So it would put him in very rare air, and deservedly so. I mean, it would be absolutely remarkable. He's going to have to, in games like last night, or the last 2 nights against Toronto, obviously you're not going to help his cause, but he's still floating right around there on pace, and he's capable of having these 4 or 5 point outbursts all the time. So I still think it's possible. I really genuinely do. And if he does, we have to look at this as really one of the greatest seasons in all time, because not only is it in a limited schedule, but it's when it's happening. This is not the 80s, the freewheeling 80s, when Gretzky and Lemieux put up all those seasons scoring at that rate, 200 points. So for him to do that in this era, in this environment, with the challenges this season presents and a shortened schedule, man, that would be, like you said, we already know how good he was, or he is, but this would really, really say that he's an all-timer.
Well, and he's not slowing down or evening out his pace. He's only getting better. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy who just continues to pick up the pace, who's probably not even close to hitting his peak years yet. Does he get 100 points? I don't know. It's going to be tough. There's so many things that can happen in this season that to say, yeah, he's but I certainly can't put it past them. I mean, this is a guy who, if the wind blows right, can get 6 or 7 points in a game. So to get 1.85 for the rest of the season, it seems realistic to me, right? Like it seems absolutely doable. I'll probably say that he won't, just so that I won't be like, oh yeah, he's going to do it, and then he doesn't. But I do believe it's absolutely possible. Teagan, what about you? Do you think Connor McDavid can do it?
Oh, geez. I think it's possible. He has pulled off his magic a few times in the past. We already referenced that last Calgary game when he lashed him 7-1 and got 5 points for himself. But he's been held pointless in 5 games so far this season. He's leading the league currently with points with 40, which he reached. But there's 56 games in this shortened season. Am I correct? So 24 games played already. You do some quick math here. You figure out there's 32 games remaining. He's got to get 2 points every game for 32 games straight. No mistakes. It's a big hill for him to climb. I know it's Connor McDavid. I know he's world renowned for being an amazing athlete and all this, but it's definitely a hill to climb that's just might be too much of a challenge for him. Nevertheless, the Oilers making the playoffs is much more of a obtainable goal for McDavid and crew.
Well, Colton, do you think the fact that he has had 5 games where maybe 5 where he hasn't scored and he still has 40 points, is that a benefit in his favor, or is that something that would detract from the idea that he could get 100? Like, I don't know if that's good or bad that he's still leading the league in points and he's had so many games where he's not scored.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the thing. It's just funny how good he is, right? He has 2 games where he doesn't put up any points, and it's what's going on. Everyone's confused. And do I think he gets there? No. But I mean, he's proved that he can do. I mean, really what can't he do, right? So would I be surprised? No. Do I expect him to? Probably not. Like Teagan said, it's basically 2 points a game for the remainder of the season, right? I don't know. I mean, I hope he proves me wrong, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, when I posed that question before we did this video and the 2 games that Toronto had left Edmonton scoreless hadn't happened yet, it looked a lot more realistic, didn't it? But it's amazing what 2 games can do, even though we're talking about Connor McDavid, and everybody knows that this is not going to be a big thing. All right, so that was my last schedule.
I got.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm just gonna throw this out there for you guys. Then he needs to average 2 points a game. If you subtract the 5 games he hasn't scored in, that's 40 points in 19 games. That's better than 2 a game. There you go. So It's possible.
Oh wow,
it's possible.
Here we go.
Yeah, because let's work on it. So I'm gonna let you guys. If you have any other topics that you want to talk about to close things off, we'll do that. We can talk about Alex Stalock. We can talk about whatever. Is there any other topics that you want to really quickly? Well, maybe let's say like 30 seconds each. Is there something, Colton, that you want to address in terms of things we have not covered yet on this early part of the Oilers season? It's not really early because it's already close to half over, considering that it's only 56 games. Anything that is weighing on you, pressing on you, something you're curious about talking about?
I mean, nothing too crazy. I think we covered everything. I guess the one thing is just the goaltending situation. I think, like you said, bringing in Stalock created a lot of questions. It seemed that a lot were questioning kind of what happens with Koskinen now. In my opinion, I don't think anything really happens with him. I think it's more stability. Like at the start of the year there with that carousel they had going on when Smith was hurt with all the waiver claims and everything. I think it was nice to just be able to bring in a third guy for insurance. Obviously Koskinen struggled early on, but I think like last year him and Smith kind of seemed like one got hot, the other cooled down. So I think that'll happen again. And I think the tandem will work for the regular season. See what happens in the playoffs. That's kind of a question mark still, but.
Well, be something we'll have to watch. Teagan, what about you? Is there anything that has been weighing on you? Have you noticed this season that it stands out for you on this Oilers young group that's played well so far?
Well, this is something that's been on my mind ever since we lost I'm forgetting his name now. Cam Talbot. There we go. Ever since we lost Cam Talbot, it's his goaltending. Exactly what Colton is bringing up here. What happens to Koskinen? I don't know. I feel like he does stick around just because his deal is 4.5 over the next, 4.5 for this season, the next season after, and finally year after, he's finally freed off of our books for then. But yeah, goaltending is the biggest situation right now that poses the most questions. I mean, Mike Smith, as I'm not sure if you guys saw this in one of my articles, but I posted about him having an historic start to the season. His 6-0 start is only second best in Oilers history. Who else bested him by one is Grant Fuhr back in the 1985-86 season, who actually started the season 8-0. And so, Mike Smith was playing lights out. He got the call in the Monday's game when he came in the second period in relief of Koskinen. And he stopped I believe he faced 19 shots and stopped all of them. So he gave the Oilers a chance to come back in that game. But as we know, unfortunately, did not happen for them. So, the goaltending situation is the big question mark for the Oilers moving forward, I'd say. They got these 3 guys now. Hopefully something comes of it. I'm not sure what's going on with Koskinen. He was kind of blamed wrongfully, in my opinion, for the lackluster start of the season. I know there's he's the only one standing directly in between the pipes, but there's 5 guys in front of him who have to play, their hearts out, to help the guy out. So, it's not all Koskinen's fault. Smith, great job so far this season. Nothing but, positive reviews from this fella here. But goaltending is the biggest question moving forward to help him maybe claim the first overall spot in this division.
Makes sense. Okay, that's 2 goaltending. Brian, where are you at?
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that too. I found it fascinating this season. Have we ever in the history of the NHL had a year where the third string goalie was suddenly so important? I don't remember a time in Oilers history where we've been so worked up about who we had as the third stringer. You probably wouldn't even know who it was half the time. And this year it's been a huge deal, obviously, with the unique situation we're in. With the taxi squad and players having potentially being quarantined and everything. So it's funny how things work out. I think between Anton Forsberg, who they first had them lost on waivers, and then Troy Grosnick, who they brought in and lost on waivers, I think Stalock is probably the best of the 3 that they've had. So, it's just funny how things work out. They played musical chairs enough, and they finally landed on a guy who I think is an excellent option to have in there is in that third slot. This is a guy who played almost 40 games for Minnesota last year. He was their starter in their qualifying round series. So this is a guy who's, a fringe, maybe number one, at least a very good backup, a very good number two in the NHL. And the Oilers now have him as their number three right now. So worked out well in the end.
Yeah, well, it'll be very interesting to see what they do with him because he's got one more season on his contract after this one. He won 20 games last season, and if they put him on the waivers to go on the Texas squad, someone's probably going to claim him. So what do you do, right? Like, do you keep all three on your active roster because that's really your only option? And then do you have a situation like Toronto had where they were going to keep Aaron Dell and everything kind of went to poop in a handbasket because of injuries and they had to waive him and they lost him? So what do you do if you're the Oilers, right? So that'll be very interesting to watch. I 100% agree. I think he'll play. I get the sense that if they're going to waive anybody, it might actually be Mikko Koskinen, right? He's got a modified no trade. That means they can waive him. I don't imagine anybody's going to pick him up for $4.5 million a season for 2 more years.
No.
And he would wind up on the taxi squad possibly. So it'll be very interesting to watch. Well, we're going to do this again next week. So we'll chat with you guys again. Colton, Teagan, Brian, thank you very much for joining us on the very first episode of Oilers Overtime with the hockeyraiders.com. Anybody that wants to check out these videos, I highly recommend you check out all the different teams, Calgary, Detroit, Toronto. They're all doing stuff that's fantastic content to watch. Stick around because we've got an interview with Jack Michaels coming up next. We had a lot of fun with Jack. He's really talkative, a huge Pennsylvania Pittsburgh fan, and we're going to learn all about him. So thanks, guys. I appreciate you joining us on the first episode of the Hockey Raiders Oilers Overtime. We'll talk to you next week. All right, everybody. Well, we're joined by Jack Michaels right now. He's been doing play-by-play for sports, specifically the NHL, for 25 years or so and 10 years with the Edmonton Oilers. Jack, how you doing? Thank you very much for joining us on Oilers Overtime.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So I'm going to start out with a softie for you, if that's okay. Just because I looked at your website, checked out a couple things, and I wanted to ask you a question that I'm sure will ease us into this conversation after the game that we had last night. But you've been in this business doing this for 10 years now with the Oilers, since 2010. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is technically my 11th year and my first on Sportsnet, along with 630 Chad.
Cool. Well, your resume is pretty extensive, from ECHL to WCHL to voted Call of the Week twice by Dan Patrick. But my question for you is, which one do you remember more fondly, the rewards and the Dan Patrick call, or like broadcasting with someone like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith?
Yeah, I had some weird. I had Bill Clement one night too, the old
Nice.
partner for Gary Thorne for ESPN for years and years. Steven Tyler was dating a girl from Anchorage, Alaska, believe it or not. That's what brought him to the game. But no, I mean, you know what? The great thing about the minor leagues is, you kind of run your own show. You do a wide variety of different things within the business. I basically had my hand in almost everything. I would go to the league meetings. I would do all the sponsorship for the team. I did all the PR for the team. I did all the travel for the team. I did basically everything but merchandising. That's the one thing I never really, had much of an interest in. But everything else, the club let me do, and so it kind of exposed me to not only different areas of the business, but also, some people outside my normal comfort zone. Like, I met people, everything from insurance agents to contractors to, body shop guys. And that was on the sponsorship side. And I made some lifelong friends out of that. So it was really a great experience. And I think, quite frankly, pushed me over the top when it came to the Oilers deciding to take a chance on an American. They saw a guy that knew a lot about their business, even though they weren't necessarily hiring some guy to do all that stuff.
So I was going to ask you that. So how did you transition from that to the Edmonton Oilers? Was it more of a, they found you situation and heard about you and saw your resume, or you applied? And
I lived in Alaska. Do you think they found me? I like most, minor league guys in the States and most junior guys in Canada, every time there's a, job opening in the NHL, you can imagine that team gets flooded with hundreds of resumes and demos and that sort of thing. And I was no different. Every time there was a job open in the National Hockey League, and really the average was like one a year. I mean, it's not easy to break in, right? And just highly competitive. And really, I honestly think one of the things that came up in our interview is they said they were asking me, well, what was one of your more innovative sponsorships? And I said, well, late in the year, I remember one time late in the summer, right? Right before the season, we had our keys to the game, which was a locksmith as per usual, bow out, and we had to scramble. And I told him, I said, I had this funeral home who wanted to get involved with our business. And I pitched them on the idea, and they're like, how did you match keys to the game with a funeral home? And I said, well, I just inserted the name of, that night's opponent. If we were playing Idaho, I'd say it's the keys to burying Idaho. And as corny and cheesy as that may sound, I kind of like saw their faces change a little bit. And I don't know what it was. I mean, I didn't think I had much of a shot when the whole process started as an American trying to come to Canada for an NHL gig, but I had a good feeling after that conversation. And sometimes it's the little things that catch people's eyes. So, it was just, it was obviously a great moment for me. I'd been at it nearly 1,000 minor league games, 11 full years in the minors. Unlike a lot of people, I didn't have the talent to come right out of college and, jump into the NHL. I had to grind away. And I think that made it all the sweeter, the fact that I really had to work for it.
Now you followed up behind Rod Phillips, and I'm sure you knew of Rod, and everybody knows of Rod Phillips. But was that difficult? How much time did it take to build some chemistry with guys like Bob Stauffer? How did that process work for you in radio? Part of it.
I didn't really give it much thought in terms of. I never looked at it as me replacing a Hall of Famer or filling his shoes, or no one's going to do that. Like, Rod was Rod. No one, especially if you come in and like try to sound like him, or, I think there's a lot of people, a lot of Western Canadians who by all rights have justly had their styles affected by Rod. That's different than some outsider coming in and trying to be like him. I just thought of it as, what? There's an old Southern proverb in the United States that says, when you're invited to the biggest party of the year, you dance with who brung you. And I interpret that always to be yourself. That's what got you there. And so, don't try to change or be someone you're not. In time, if you put in the work, I think your audience will come to appreciate what you bring, not what you try to do to fit into a certain mold. And that's really what's happened here. I mean, I'll give the city a lot of credit. They never really gave me grief for not being Rod. You could have brought in anyone here. You could have brought in Chris Cuthbert, and it wouldn't have mattered because he wouldn't have been Rod Phillips. He wouldn't have been the guy that they grew up with for 40 years. Right. So, you got to give, quote unquote, the new guy or whoever the next guy is, time to find his rhythm and style. And I think the city and the organization allowed me that room. And now I feel, I've lived here longer than any spot other than my hometown. And I've lived in this house longer than any other house I lived other than the one I grew up in. And in a year or two, I'll have lived longer in the house I live in now than the house I grew up in. So, I feel like I've never been a guy who identifies with like, oh, I'm this and I'm living here. Edmonton's my home. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. And it was when I was looking at your site and thinking, man, he's been here since 2010. It really is kind of like, wow, time flies.
Yeah.
And now you're into the television side with Sportsnet. Is there a big difference for you when you're
Huge,
broadcasting radio versus like what's the biggest difference in terms of like you got to tell the story on radio so people can visualize what you're talking about, whereas on TV,
shut up. That's the thing about TV. Right? Shut up. Like the pullback on my natural verbosity, I guess you could say, is unbelievable. And you know, it's still a work in progress. I mean, I haven't figured it all out yet. You know, I feel like, you know, just as when I was starting out in radio, I feel like my 50th game is going to be way better than my first game, and my 100th game is going to be way better than my 50th game. And if you're not improving in this industry, I feel like I'm a better radio play-by-play guy as a result of the TV experience, because I'm bouncing back and forth right now, and I think it's sharpened me up on both mediums. So I think long-term, it's great for me personally. I think, you know, for those who really enjoyed my radio work with Bob, you still get, you know, a good chunk of those games. I think Cam Moon, the guy who does the games when I'm on TV with Bob, is fit in perfectly. Cam's a great personality and also, you know, an experienced pro. I think the Oilers are unbelievably lucky that they had a guy with a quarter century of experience right down the road. So I think it's all working out. And, you know, that said, it is a big adjustment. I'm not going to tell you anything else.
What about the fact that there are no fans? Like, we were hearing that OEG is kind of
Brutal.
pitching
That's brutal.
to get them back in. Is it really difficult trying to do this without anybody in the building? Are you in the building for a lot of the games, or are you sometimes when they're on the road at home still?
Yeah, no, I don't travel. I'm not traveling this year. I'm calling all the road games off a monitor. I am in the building for every home game, but it is not the same. I mean, it is unbelievably. I don't want to say I feel like I'm manufacturing energy, because I do tend to kind of lose myself in the game. And the mix in my ears is reflective of the, you know, remix sound that they've done and things of that nature. So it's not like I feel like I'm in a vacuum, but I do to some degree. I mean, there's no interplay with the fans as I'm walking to and from the arena. You know, all of that was so important. And on the road, especially, like, I can remember the walk to Vegas's arena was always fun, because you'd run past a bunch of Oilers fans, you'd walk past a bunch. It was just a vibe. Like, it was a tailgate scene. There's just some things that are just brutal without fans. I can't wait till they're back, especially with, you know, some of the big series. The one that Edmonton's playing right now, I just look. Toronto's been better, but you can't tell me that the results of the first two games, maybe the results would have been the same, but I think there would have been even more pushback, because there would have been an energy and a vibe in the crowd. And right now, you ask the players, and they tell you, you know, the only difference is last change, and that's no fun. I mean, what's the point? So I can't wait till fans are back. I don't know when they're going to be back. I've seen the same stuff you have. I have no insight to share on that, but boy, I'll tell you what, I can't wait until even 2000 are back. I'd take it tomorrow if we could do it safely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you sort of took us there, so let's go there and talk a little bit about the Oilers, obviously. So is it concerning for you? I mean, we're coming off 11-2. We just had 2 games where we did not play very well.
No, Toronto's a good team.
Not an issue. Yeah.
No, I mean, Toronto's a good team. Like, you know, you run into this sometimes with, like, even my buddies, like my good friends. You know, the other team wants to win too. Like, it's not like Toronto has shown up to just be some sort of speed bump for the Oilers. You know, Toronto wants to win too, and Toronto's a good team. You know, coming back from 3-0 down is not the same against Toronto as it is against Vancouver. Like, it isn't. Sorry. I mean, it's not close. Toronto, you know, if you look at the league standings, Toronto's not only the best team in the division, it's the best team in the league. Now, we don't know how good the divisions are. That's the one thing I can't tell you. Other than the East, I've heard every division, you know, criticized. And some would say, look, even the East, you know, are Washington and Pittsburgh what they were 3 years ago?
Right.
I don't think so. You know, the Central, obviously, that misfit bunch, you know, on the one hand, you know, Tampa's very good and they're up there again. They're the defending champions, but a lot of people are saying, well, how good of a division could be if Florida's also up there, right? You know, I mean, I'm just saying every division has been criticized. Like, you know, the West is a little, you know, San Jose, Anaheim are viewed the way Ottawa's. There's criticism of all these divisions. So we don't know what's good, who's good, who's not good, where everyone fits. I don't quite know where Edmonton fits in the grand scheme of things. But I do think it's instructive to remember that Edmonton was, right there lingering in the top 10 last year, one game away from a bye. So I still think the Oilers are a good team. I still think the Oilers are a good team outside the North Division. But you know what? Toronto's playing the best hockey of anyone in the league thus far, at least if you go by the record. And
Sure.
even if the North Division turns out to be weaker than the other divisions, and there's really no way to prove that right now because, of course, there's no inter-division play, Toronto hasn't taken its foot off the gas. They've got a relatively big lead in the division, even a relatively big lead in the league standings, and they just keep churning out victories. They've now won 6 of 7. So I don't think it's a major concern for the Oilers. You're not going to go through even a 56-game season without a bit of a lull, even offensively, and even as talented as this group is up front.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the surprise for a lot of people was the no goals in 2 games. But has there been a big surprise for you this season? Something that when you're watching the Oilers has really stood out for you and said, hey, we did not expect this, whether it's Puljujarvi or something like what has there been a surprise so far?
The depth. When you have during that 11-2 run that you talked about, 13 different guys scored twice. Like twice.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that is not even last year. I don't think the lineup was as balanced. And I know that, Sheahan and Archibald started to come as the second half of the year, but I think it's, with the addition of Puljujarvi, and some guys have been relatively quiet, like Yamamoto hasn't maintained the same pace he was at last year, yet it still seems from game to game, different guys pop up. The D, for instance, leading the league in points and goals, even with this, mini slump against Toronto. That's pretty impressive. I didn't have that at the start of the year, and that's with the addition of Barrie. The other night, Gaetan Haas gets the eventual game winner in Calgary. Those are contributions that I think should have Edmonton fans, feeling good beyond the last 2 games. And now, I think there's just as much depth in goal as a lot of different teams. Alex Stalock is the 3rd guy. He won 20 games last year. He was Minnesota's starter in the playoffs. So I think, Ken Holland has done a real nice job of kind of fortifying all these different areas. I don't know what's going to happen to the defense when William Laguson's, ready to play. There's a lot of monkeying around that Dave Tippett's going to have to do. He's got real quality guys, at the bottom end of the roster.
Yeah, and the fact that they stayed relatively injury-free gives them some
knock on wood for
right?
that.
Yeah,
knock on wood for that. But that's why you have depth. And so if the Oilers do get a little nicked up, I certainly feel better about their chances in that regard than I would have even a year ago. And certainly, better than 17, 18, 19, which were non-playoff years, in my estimation, largely predicated on the fact the Oilers didn't have that depth.
Yeah, you mentioned the job that Holland's done, and I agree. He's picked up some really nice pieces for very little money, but one of the guys that he's going to have
no room. There you go. With no room. He's done it without any room.
But here's a guy who's going to take some cap space. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is due for a deal here. Any idea, any take on what might happen here? Is this a situation where we actually should be kind of concerned that maybe he won't resign? Or is this kind of just a matter of time to figure it out?
I think the player wants to re-sign in Edmonton, and I think the Oilers want to re-sign him. As always, it's gonna. There's a money spot, and there's a middle ground that team and player are gonna have to get to. And again, with this flat cap coming in, and the fact that because of the pandemic, there's no guarantee that Canadian teams are gonna have fans even in the first half of 21-22. I don't want to cause that alarm, and I know there's plans on the table, but I don't know whether full capacity is happening in Canada anytime soon because of the lack of vaccinations. I'm just reading the tea leaves. I don't know any of this. I don't have any more insight than you do.
Yeah.
But there are some concerns in that regard. Where that money spot is, Honestly, I'd tell you that it's going to be somewhere in the 6 3/4 range would be my guess, is where everything gets established. Right now, there's a little push and pull probably, but I do think it'll get done because number one, I just think both team and player want it. So that's a start. And number two, Rick Vallette is not known as kind of the nuclear option type of agent. He wants to make it work for the player because he knows the player wants to make it work. And I think Oiler management is going to find a way to make it work because beyond the ice surface, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, integral part of the Oiler community, really. I mean, he's beloved in this town. So I think both sides will work to make it secure.
Well, that'll be good news for a lot of Oilers fans who have been
I don't
asking
think
and
there's
writing.
any real troublesome there.
That's good. All right, so I'm going to finish it off with a quick game if you're cool with it.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
I'm going to say, give you two options, and then all you got to do is say the one that's quickest in your head. And if there's a third that you're absolutely stuck on and say, you know what, you didn't give me that option, but it's this one, just fire it out at me. That work?
Yeah,
okay,
sure. Fire away.
So we'll start with what we were just talking about. Sign or not sign Ryan Nugent-Hopkins?
Sign.
Okay. Keep or not keep Adam Larson?
I'd keep him.
What do you watch?
Again, it's gonna depend on the deal, but he'll get a deal elsewhere. And I think Larson brings a physical element the Oilers need as a complement to Darnell Nurse. It can't always be Darnell Nurse on the back end from a physical perspective. Sorry, that was
no, that's okay. That's good. Okay, so sign or not sign Tyson Barrie?
Oh, I'd do everything I can to sign him. I mean, he's a weapon that the Oilers haven't had in years. And that's no disrespect to Oscar Klefbom, but part of the reason I'd say re-sign him is I'm not 100% sure that Oscar Klefbom is coming back anytime soon.
Right. Watch first, Pirates or Steelers?
Pirates.
Protect or not protect, Jesse Puljujarvi?
Are you kidding me? Protect.
There you go. 100 points or not 100 points, Connor McDavid?
I'm going to say no. I think he'll be around 93, 94.
Be close, though. A favorite arena snack, nachos or popcorn? Or nachos. Other, if you've got another. That's cool, too.
It's got to be nachos. I don't find the popcorn as fresh as it needs to be. I make better popcorn at home. Sorry.
Hey, there you go. Is he injured or not injured, Leon Draisaitl?
You know what? I don't think he's injured. There's the difference. Is he banged up? Yes. Injured, you don't play. Banged up, you play. There's a difference even between injured and hurt. Right. I don't know whether Draisaitl's hurt. I definitely think he's banged up. I definitely do not believe he's injured.
Makes sense. Bridge deal or no bridge deal, Kyler Yamamoto?
Oh, I think there's a bridge deal to be had, especially with the way the cap's going to work and the other free agents we talked about.
When you get back to golfing, is it over 85 or under 85?
Oh, over 85. Sadly, my son is under 85, so it's no fun getting beat like a drum by, I mean, he's 14 now, but he's been beating me badly since he was 12.
Just wait. Oilers make the playoffs, don't make the playoffs.
Oh, they'll make the playoffs this year.
Right on. Well, that was it for me. Jack, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got other meetings to get to and other interviews to do, so I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate you coming on Oilers Overtime. This was our very first episode, by the way. So you were our first special guest on the episode, so I appreciate your time in doing this for us.
Absolutely, Jim. A pleasure.
Thank you very much.